Okay, the topic I chose to do my internship fact on is diversity on television, and the major claim that I have here is the American film industry can receive higher ratings and more revenue with greater diversity among representation on screen. And my first secondary claim is diverse representation brings a crowd of supporters in the groups being represented. According to Forbes magazine, Hollywood only stands to hurt itself with lack of diversity, given that America is projected to be a minority majority within a few decades. It only makes sense to continue striving for better on-screen representation and appealing to minority audiences with vivid, inclusive storytelling. And as of 2017 Hollywood Diversity Report concludes, diversity sells first and foremost because today's audiences themselves are diverse and are striving to see stories and characters from which they can identify themselves. And it's very important to understand now within this argument that the population of viewers are actually the minority population is actually greater than the non-minority population. And minority can actually includes handicaps, racial minorities, even LGBT minorities that are in this group. It also builds a world in which women constitute the strongest warriors, the most brilliant scientists, and clear-headed moral compasses, rather than regulating them to damsels in distress or comic relief. There is a larger gap between percentage of people of color and Caucasian moviegoers that could change with a more representation. Hispanics are actually the highest moviegoers to actually be out there, but they are one of the least represented on screen as of today. And according to the Theatrical Market Statistics by Motion Pictures Association of America, the per capita audience by ethnicity, or for each person in relation to people taken individually, it is expressed that the Caucasian audience attends less film showings than their counterparts. From 2012 to 2016, it was Caucasian 3.6 through 3.2, African American 3.8 to 4.2, Hispanic 3.4 to 4.6, and Asian 4.0 to 6.1. Analyzing the top 100 movies of 2016 from the report in the Guardian News and Media found that 31.4% of speaking characters were actually women, while non-white groups accounted for 29.1% of these. And 13.6 were black and 5.7 were Asian. Hispanic people, 3.1, were particularly underrated, with more than half of the 2016 films having films featuring no speaking characters who were Hispanic. Only 2.7% of speaking characters were depicted with having a disability. Meanwhile, 1.1 were speaking characters and gay or lesbian. Behind the broadening of specific network, broadening the audience of specific networks can be done by increasing diversity on screen. A specific movie that comes to mind is The Ghost in the Shell. The Ghost in the Shell was a recreation of a Japanese anime that was actually extremely popular, and it starred Scarlett Johansson, which was accused of whitewashing its entire cast. And according to Steve Rose from the Guardian News and Media, the decision to cast Scarlett Johansson as a cyborg heroine, originally named Mitoko Kusanagi, had not gone down well. This was whitewashing, and the fans complained mainly about that. The role should have gone to a Japanese actor, and it explains, including the image of Johansson with a slogan, "I am totally Japanese," on websites that promoted the movie. A lot of the fans were actually denigrating the movie itself by constantly creating memes against it or just making fun of the movie itself. But East Asians have particular reason to feel aggravated, having seen their culture regularly plundered, appropriated, stereotyped, ethnically cleansed, and Ghost in the Shell comes in the wake of Emma Stone playing a Chinese woman. Alison Nung in Cameron Crowe's Aloha, Matt Damon at the heart of Chinese epic The Great Wall, and the white-dominated Hollywood versus versions of Asian stories such as The Last Airbender and Dragon Ball Evolution. Finally, the productions with diversity don't fail to bring in revenue. Harry Witter, an entertainment reporter with Business Insider, claimed that CAA, the creative arts agency that represents 12 different major cities in film and television, including London, Beijing, Switzerland, Los Angeles, New York, etc., examined the diversity of the top 10 billed actors in 413 theatrical films released from the start of 2014 to the end of 2016, along with box office performance and audience demographics. It found that the most successful films at the box office had a relatively large share of non-white viewers. Of the top 10 grossing movies of 2016, 47% of the opening weekend audience and 45% in 2015 were people of color. And films with what the CAA regards as truly diverse casts tend to outperform ones with less diverse casts. This proves that we do have a large audience that will support movies written, produced, directed, and starring people that are considered minorities, including Black Panther, Call Me By Your Name, Moonlight, Love, Simon. And in conclusion, I encourage production companies to consider the minority population when representing specific topics in order to advance in audience turnouts and approval. Thank you.
All right, the diversity issue presupposes that there's a shortage of diversity, and the best place where you have that information is in the in a couple of examples where you were talking about the top 100 films and whether or not they featured characters. You had 31% women and 13% blacks, and the question is how much diversity is necessary? Is this not representative or typical? Obviously, with women, that certainly seems like it's an underrepresentation. With blacks, that seems like it's an accurate statistic in proportion to the population, at least in this country. I don't know how it would work internationally. And the Hispanic population is the one that you seem to suggest being most underrepresented, and I think that the point needed to be developed a little bit more. I think that also needs to kind of be the first point, because the argument here is that there's a lack of diversity, and that's the thing that demonstrates a lack of diversity, and you kind of start with some other issues which are not unimportant about the size of the audience, but I think the audience seems to matter more when we're talking about what it is they're watching. There was a whole series of statistics on that information concerning the audience that was not quite clear. You gave me a range of different groups: Caucasian 3.6 to 3.2, blacks 3.8 to some other number, Asians 4.0 to 6.1, and I'm not exactly sure what that means. Is that the average number of movies that they see each year? That was unclear, and I think that that's probably what the statistic refers to, but you want to be a little bit clearer than that. The information about how some characters have been whitewashed, that I think is important. Tying it into the failure of the film is also one of the things that you attempt to do a little bit with at least Ghost in the Shell. I don't know that the failure of a film like Aloha or The Great Wall had anything to do with who was cast in the film. It mostly had to do with the fact that those movies suck. But, the idea that, diversity might have had something to do with it, you've at least raised that as a possibility. I like some of the research that you've got. I think you found some creative information to use. I do think you need, to me, I think the argument that we're going to hear most is we already have diversity. That's the trend that's going on here. You're warning us about a problem that is really either disappearing or it's largely non-existent at this point. And so that's probably where the body of the argument's going to be. All right.